Hello, hello, hello! Welcome back to another episode of The Delicious Legacy. It's the time of the year, isn't it? The weather gets colder, we stay inside for longer, and we perhaps cook a little bit more. There are many festivities and celebrations coming up this autumn and winter, and we bake desserts and cookies and more bread as well, and other so many different concoctions. And we piling up the pounds for the long winter ahead. Traditionally, anyway. Let's not forget our winters get a bit more odd in recent years. But yeah, even I was thinking to do an episode anyway for desserts and so on, and traditional cakes and all the differences and similarities across Europe. What's better than the smell of a freshly baked cake just coming out of the oven? The sweet smell of the sugar, of the butter, of the spices, all together, just warming up the house, your soul, and basically they make you happy. So I'm very happy that today, in our archaeogastronomical adventure, we are joined by Kristin from the YouTube channel Bake Across Europe. She will guide us through some of her favorite recipes, some of her favorite desserts and cakes, and the different adventures that she encountered by baking all the weird and wonderful desserts in the many different variations across the continent of Europe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Kristin, welcome to the Delicious Legacy podcast.
Thank you, Thom. It's so great to be here. I was really honored that you asked me.
Yeah, because I've been following you online on YouTube and your channel on YouTube and also on Twitter, and we're friends on Twitter.
Yes, I discovered you a few months ago, so I just started listening to your podcast then, and I've learned a lot from you. I really enjoy your episodes. I just finished today listening to your interview with Brigitte Webster, and that was fascinating, learning about Tudor food and her garden. And I'm always inspired by people who have an interest and can throw themselves into it. So that was a really fun one to listen to.
She's great, isn't she?
Yes.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I've spent a lot of time in Europe over the years and have a lot of inspiration from that and some interest in food and baking. I feel like a lot of people say this, but I was first inspired by the Great British Baking Show, or Bake Off, as you call it in the UK.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people say that, so it sounds a little cliche at this point, but that is really kind of what got me interested in European baking. I loved seeing the different baked goods showcased from all the different European countries, and so many of them I had never heard of before. And I've always loved baking. I even considered going to pastry school after college, but ultimately decided against it because I didn't want the bakery or restaurant lifestyle. But I did continue to bake at home and foster the hobby. So I kind of dabbled with starting a blog for a while. That never really amounted to anything. And then I thought perhaps a YouTube channel would be fun. So I uploaded my first video in June of 2019, which was a German seeded rye bread called Kornbeißerbrot. And that first video did really well. So that was kind of an encouragement to try again and keep going. I've sporadically added to the channel over the years. I took a lot of breaks. I didn't publish consistently for the first 3 years just because life took precedence. I had a toddler and a baby when I first started, and then in 2022 I had another baby, so there just wasn't time to be consistent with it. But it's always been a subject and a project close to my heart. Along with baking, I've always had like a deep love for Europe. From the time I was 14 up through my early 20s, I'd had many opportunities to travel. My first time was with my French class in high school. And then every year after that, I'd had some kind of opportunity to travel. A few of those experiences, I was an exchange student with a German family outside the Black Forest. And then a campus experience with my university where we stayed in Rome for a semester. And then after college, I was an au pair in Hamburg, Germany for 6 months. So with all those experiences, I've traveled to most of Western Europe and some of the British Isles. And then my first experience traveling just really seeded a love for Europe, experiencing the different customs, the different traditions that I got to experience, especially living with families and going to different festivals. It just really stuck with me all those years and really left like sort of an indelible mark on me. I just could never get them out of my head.
And then you couldn't stop cooking them and baking cakes and breads from all these different countries. So different, yet having a lot of similarities with each other.
Yes, definitely. And just being from the US, and we do have our own customs and our own traditions and regional foods, but our history, it's just not as long. So naturally, the customs and traditions are a little less complex, a little less deep. So I've just always been fascinated by the cultures that have those deep-seated traditions that go back hundreds of years. So that's where the inspiration for my channel came from, just combining my interest in baking and my love for Europe and the travels that I've had and just exploring those things through my channel.
Yeah, and finding the roots for all these different baking goodies.
Right. And I'm no expert by any means. I don't know all the traditions and all the foods, but that's sort of where my channel, what the purpose of my channel is. I'm exploring those things and learning about those things and then sharing them with people.
Yeah, we don't stop learning.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So obviously you have lots of different recipes from all over Europe. So from Croatia and from Norway, Sicily, Greece, and so on. Tell us a little bit about how do you get inspiration to what do you find inspiration basically? And you say, oh, okay, I'm going to do this now.
Mostly from cookbooks. I have a pretty large collection, cookbooks from different countries, different regions of Europe. And so I've always had the hobby of sitting down and reading a cookbook rather than reading a novel. So I'll just, through my reading, I will be inspired by something and be like, oh, that's really interesting. I've never heard about that. I'd like to explore that more. And then that's where an inspiration for the different videos comes from.
Let's talk a little bit about the different baking goods associated with different countries and the different unique holidays and feast days and all that. What have you discovered over the past 4 years doing all this?
Yeah. So I suppose most recently, as of September 29th, it was Michaelmas, which is the feast of St. Michael the Archangel. And in British folklore, it's said that on that day that when St. Michael cast Satan out of heaven, that he fell into a bush of brambles. Brambles are like raspberries, blackberries. And because of that, there is an old British folklore superstition that's the last day that you're allowed to harvest brambles or harvest blackberries usually. So naturally, blackberry desserts are enjoyed on St. Michael's feast day, which used to be October 10th, but is now September 29th. So I thought that was interesting. Right. I thought that was an interesting one that I recently learned about. There's lots of feast days, especially during the Advent season leading up to Christmas, that are pretty notable and have a common thread through a lot of European countries, one of them being St. Nicholas Day. The feast of St. Nicholas is celebrated in a lot of the Germanic countries. And I have a video for it, Spekulas cookies or Spekulatius in German. They're a spiced cookie that are eaten on that day, and they have traditions of making them in these beautiful wooden molds that are made in different shapes, oftentimes in the shape of St. Nicholas, or in the Netherlands in the shape of windmills and all sorts of things. And you can see these wooden molds that have been made for centuries that they would shape the cookies into. Some of them are so big, they're probably like over a foot long. The ones you can buy from the store today are about, the size of half of your hand. So not that big anymore, but those are usually given to children on either the eve of St. Nicholas or the day of St. Nicholas on December 6th. Some other feast days leading up to Christmas would be St. Lucy's Day. And I think a lot of people are probably familiar with saffron buns that are eaten in Sweden, lussebullar. And those are made in all sorts of different shapes. representing different things. I have a cookbook called The Nordic Baking Book by Magnus Nielsen. He's a Swedish Michelin star chef, and he cataloged all the different Nordic countries and their baking traditions. And I learned a lot from the video I made on that one a couple years ago. There are 9 different traditional shapes. Most people are just familiar with that S-shaped looking one. But there are 9 different traditional shapes for those saffron buns, which I thought was really interesting. And then, of course, Christmas and all the traditional baked goods for Christmas. There's more than I could name for those.
Yeah.
And then Epiphany Tide, which would be from Epiphany, which is January 6th, the feast of the 3 kings going to visit the baby Jesus. Many cultures have king cakes. Even here in the United States, we have king cakes in the South, brought over from the French, and all different varieties from both the Germanic countries and also France and Spain. And usually those king cakes are eaten and enjoyed during Epiphany Tide, which would be from January 6th up through the day before Ash Wednesday when Lent starts. So I've just learned about all these different kinds of traditions and the foods that are associated with them. And it's interesting to see how they're all very different, but have a similar note that run through a lot of these European countries because of the similar feast days that they were celebrating.
Yeah, because they are obviously referring to a certain saint, or they're about their religious holidays.
Right.
Yeah, they all kind of happen at the same time, but yet being different geographical regions, and they have different ingredients. Like in the past, obviously, people they couldn't have the same fresh ingredients from Norway to the south of Spain. So you make do with what you have.
Right, exactly. And you see, it's interesting though. There's so many similarities, like leading up to Lent and those like carnival days leading up to it. You have so many cultures have pancakes and fried doughs, donuts or fritters, leading up the week before Lent. And then in that feasting season after Easter begins, then so many cultures have foods rich in dairy and eggs, which were both not in season during Lent, as well as foods that they fasted from during Lent. So all the foods differ greatly, but have a pretty common theme that runs through the different countries.
What was something that surprised you? What was like something that you thought it was unique, different, or you didn't expect? There was something. Is there something there that you didn't expect from your culinary baking adventure around Europe?
A recent video back in the summertime, I made a Sicilian watermelon tart. That was a new one for me. I had never cooked with watermelon before. And I was not expecting the flavor. When you cook watermelon, it does not taste like watermelon anymore. It becomes more of like a pumpkin flavor. So that was a really surprising dessert for me. I'm going to call that one an acquired taste. I can't say that I loved it. Yes.
Interesting.
Especially with that jellied center. It was an odd combination of textures and flavor for me.
I see. And do you find the cakes and the baking process of this traditional desserts, let's say, do they use a lot of sugar, or is a lot less to what you expected or from modern desserts? How do you find that the sugary element of it?
I would say it just depends. I would say it depends on when the recipe was created, how old the recipe is. I do find that there's a common theme in European baking of it being less sweet than American baked goods. So I will often make something and my husband will be like, this isn't sweet enough. But I think it's just American preferences that feel that way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'd say, yes, generally, I would say European desserts are less sweet, but it also just depends which dessert you're eating. If you're eating a fine layered cake, it's probably got a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah. What is the oldest recipe that you think you found?
Well, I haven't, one that I've made or one that I've just discovered? Either?
Either.
Well, I recently was looking into spit cakes, which are the ones roasted, made over fire on a turning spit.
What? I never had
You
that
haven't?
before.
Those are the ones made on like a cylinder that you turn constantly as you drip batter over it. And those are pretty ancient. Most European countries have some version of this. Say that researchers have looked into it and think that it may go back to the Greeks. That they would carry these big cakes on their shoulders that they had roasted over a spit that were like 2 meters long, and they would bring them to their Dionysian feasts.
Right.
I'm not sure if you've ever heard of, the first time I encountered this was in Germany. They're called a Baumkuchen, which means tree cake. And it has a hole in the middle. And when you slice into it, it looks like layers of a tree, like the rings of a tree. And it's made by slowly turning a cylinder as you pour batter over it as it bakes. And yeah, a lot of countries have these. In France, in the Pyrenees, they have one called, French word's not coming to me, but it's basically what they call it, a tree cake as well. But it has spikes because it looks like a Christmas tree. They do it faster. They pour the batter over faster than they do in Germany. So because of that, as the batter drips and bakes over the open fire, it creates what looks like tree branches sticking out. So that's fascinating. It goes all the way even into Eastern Europe, and Lithuania has a tree cake, and the Czech Republic and Poland and Hungary, they have one. So I think that's probably the oldest dessert I've discovered so far.
How interesting.
Yeah, I would like to try making it, but I don't know how I would construct a turning spit for myself. I might need to breed a turn spit dog.
Yeah. So basically, it was like you said, a butter, like a sweetened butter that they drip slowly or faster into the.
Yes, like a thin batter that you can pour.
And that was with flour, eggs, sugar. What was the ingredient?
Yes, flour,
butter?
egg, sugar. Some countries seem to use sour cream, like in Lithuania. So it just depends on the country, but usually just what you would create a pancake batter out of. Yeah.
I see. You had a video about the French lemon tart, and in which you actually have a question. Is it actually French?
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose you're going to have to call it French now because it's very much a part of French culture. But I guess my question in the video was, where did it come from? So the lemon curd part of it is an English invention. So it's funny because a lot of times a culture will make one thing, but then it gets adopted by another culture and it becomes part of their culture, and then you don't see it as often in the original place it was made. So yes, you enjoy lemon curd in England, but not in the form of French lemon tart.
True. And also, I mean, obviously lemons initially, they were brought to Europe more so by the Arabs.
Right.
So they used them a lot in Sicily when there was a conquest of Sicily from the Saracens. So I think obviously you have all these different elements coming together and creating something new.
Right.
Always a culture will adopt all this different stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so you must find lemon cakes and lemon desserts in Sicily, which they have origins from the Arabs. And and then Italy, southern Italy and Sicily also, they have influences from Spain and from France later on. So everything kind of comes together and they create something new.
Right, exactly.
For our delight.
Yes. Yes, and that's a decadent recipe, that French lemon tart. I think it has a total of 12 eggs and 24 tablespoons of butter. And that's just in the filling.
Very rich and very decadent,
yes.
To say. But that's more of a recent element addition to the desserts. Usually they were a bit more thirsty, a bit more of them. They used the the available resources, right? There was a little bit of that. What can we find out? What can we say about that? So how important was the role of this scarcity of ingredients sometimes, and the famine or the different famines that occurred throughout Europe? Because obviously most people were peasants. Food was difficult to find in many times history. And
I've always found this to be a fascinating subject. It's partly why I started a series on my channel called Rye Breads of Europe, because rye is a big example of how people have been resourceful with the foods that they could grow in their regions and climates. A lot of people, when they think of European bread, what comes to mind are the French breads made from white wheat flour, like the baguette or the fougasse or pain de campagne. But much of Europe could not grow that type of grain needed for those sorts of breads. In Scandinavia, for example, where it's cold for so much of the year, the grains they could grow were mostly rye and barley, which are very low in gluten. So because of that, they couldn't create the breads that are light and fluffy and rise well. And we often think of flatbreads as something coming from like the Middle East or Mexico. But for much of history, Scandinavia mostly ate flatbreads because of the type of flour that they could cultivate. And it's really interesting because rye creates breads that can last a long time, and wheat didn't grow well there. And so because of that, much of Scandinavia didn't have a culture surrounding the bakery. So without the need for daily loaves of bread and without large populations in rural northern towns and villages, there just wasn't a need for a baker. So they developed a tradition of baking flatbreads twice a year and then hanging them up on poles to dry and then eating those breads throughout the year. So many of their breads are round with a hole in the center. And they're also crispy because the less moisture it has, the longer it lasts. And part of the reason they would only bake twice a year was also to conserve the firewood that they would need for heating their homes instead of heating ovens. And then you still see remnants of this tradition, actually. Many families still throughout the Scandinavian countries still get together at Christmas time to bake flatbreads as part of their Christmas traditions now. So I've always found rye to be a very interesting example of resourcefulness and creating something that became part of the culture and created for the specific areas that it was grown in. And then, if you want to get deep into the history of rye, you could delve into the times throughout history when rye was infested with something called ergot, which is a fungus.
Yeah.
And I recently discovered this and I was fascinated by it. It's kind of a dark history, but it just shows you what people had to deal with in times of scarcity and famine and infestation of different things in their crops. Ergotism is the name used for describing symptoms that people experience when they eat rye contaminated with ergot. It causes a whole range of things, everything from muscle spasms, hallucinations, inability to speak, mania, as well as another type of ergot poisoning that causes violent burning throughout the body and then leading to gangrene and loss of limbs. Yeah, I know. I bring this up not to be gruesome, but rather to highlight, the periods through European history where people had to resort to eating these different things, either through scarcity or from lack of knowledge that it could harm you. There is even an order of monks called the Brotherhood of St. Anthony that was founded in what's now the southeastern part of France in 1095. And they were created specifically for taking care of the victims of ergot poisoning. And so because of that, ergot poisoning became known as St. Anthony's fire because of the fire that they would experience, that burning feeling. Yeah. So I'm glad we've eliminated that from our rye crops.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's interesting to see this throughout history and learn that there was even an order of monks created to take care of people who dealt with this.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I'll be back after this short break. You did a Greek dessert once,
I did.
Didn't you? Like
I made the
yeah.
spoon sweets out of green walnuts.
Mm.
That was interesting. I came across them in a cookbook and thought, oh, I'm never going to make those. Where am I going to get green walnuts? And then
Yeah.
I went for a walk one day and noticed that my neighbor had a walnut tree.
There you go.
And he didn't even know he had the walnut tree because it was growing on the periphery of his property. And I asked if I could harvest them, and he was like, sure, I'm not going to use them. So I thought, well, I'll make green walnut spoon sweets. And that was interesting. That was a long 7-day process of soaking them and changing the water every day and boiling them many times on the day of. So that was a fun experience.
Yeah, very long drawn process to make
that
it.
Could be also an example of resourcefulness, taking something inedible and making it edible.
And the spoon sweets, for the people who haven't encountered them, it's something like a syrupy sweet dessert that you get in Greece. So it could be like, as you said, you've done the green walnuts. Other people do cherries. There can be any kind of, or oranges, or any kind of fruit served in a sweet syrup, in a very, very sweet sugary syrup. And you usually get a little bit, like, let's say 1 walnut or 2 walnuts, something like that, with your Greek coffee and a glass of water as a welcome to the house. And usually older people used to do, grandmothers, our yayas used to do that every time they had a different spoon sweet in the house.
So is it not that common anymore?
I think it comes back. I think it came back in fashion a little bit later, lately, the past few years. But I think for many years it was kind of what the old people would do, really.
Well, that's what my channel's about, rediscovering the old traditions and bringing them back. I love that. I love learning about those different traditions.
Yeah, and you have so many desserts from places like more Northern Europe, like Poland and Lithuania and Wallachia, which is modern day. What would you say is Wallachia?
That recipe I just made was from the Czech Republic.
Czech Republic, yeah. So it's not a classic French or more modern British cakes and desserts, but all these different, going back in time and also traveling a bit more into the unknown corners of Europe.
Yes, I really like all of the French desserts and the fine pastries, but I'm mostly interested in finding the unique things that local people make that they've been making for a long time, and it's part of their culture.
Do you try these recipes a few times before you start doing your video stuff?
I usually test them beforehand, because anytime I've attempted to not test them and film them, I usually mess up. So I've learned, okay, I need to test these recipes before I film them. And I usually change them and make them a little bit different than whatever original recipe that I've tried, just to tweak it to make it a little better. That Swedish strawberry cake that I made in the summertime, I had to test that 5 times because the cake kept falling. So I had to figure out why, and I had to rewrite the recipe. And so... yeah.
How interesting.
Always trying to make it better so it works for people. I don't want people trying a recipe on my channel and failing for them.
Yeah. The Czech pies, they look very interesting. Tell us a bit about them if you want.
Sure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with kolaches. That's how you'd say it in English, but they're like little round pastries, usually like a puffy sweet roll with a center in the middle that has like something sweet, like jam or farmer's cheese or something like that. These are a kolach that comes from the southeastern part of the Czech Republic. And instead of being like sweet rolls, they're more like a flat pie. They look like a pizza. That's what I first thought they were when I saw them. And they're actually a protected food by the EU and the Czech government. They're called Valašský fragal, and you can only call them that if they're made in that region of the country with specific ingredients. So I'm always intrigued by foods like that. So you make a sweet yeasted dough, you roll it out into a round circle like a pizza, and then you spread it with various toppings. And traditional toppings include poppy seed filling or a sweet farmer's cheese filling. And I also made traditional filling called povidla, which is a plum product where you take plums and you stew them down into a really thick paste. It has no sugar or anything added to it. It's just plum. And then you spread that on top. And I also did the same thing with pear. You can do the same thing with pears. And so those were 4 traditional flavors that I made for the channel. And they were good. I enjoyed them.
Any plans to visit any Greek recipes? Any other Greek recipes?
Yes. I don't have any on. Well, actually, no, I do. I was planning a Greek Christmas cookie, mela macarona. Have you had it?
Yeah,
is it good?
Yeah.
I've actually never had it, but I was intrigued when I saw the recipe, so I'm going to be trying that soon.
Yeah, I do it every Christmas. So
okay.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's traditional then.
It's traditional. It's good, and it's basically a recipe that once you make it, you make loads of them. So you have to make like 60, 70 pieces or something like that. You know,
Okay.
They're small, of course, but they're very Maury. So yeah, you have one. Great, I'll have another one. Then every day.
Every day you have a couple.
Yeah. So definitely make the amount that you see in the recipe. It will tell you also. It will be like for 60, 70, 80 pieces, whatever.
Sure.
Don't have it. don't make it. I think. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make the full recipe.
Yeah, I think everybody will enjoy them.
Are there any other Greek recipes I should include in the channel that are not Christmas recipes, but something that you love that you think should be highlighted?
Interesting. So from my hometown, there's a dessert called revani, which is like a sponge cake, a syrup sponge cake made with semolina.
Oh, okay.
So that's a traditional one from my hometown.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah,
that sounds good. I love all the syrup sweets from the Balkan countries.
I think that's and then galaktoboureko, which is another one, which I'll have to send you a link or how to pronounce it or how to find it.
Okay.
But yeah,
yes, send me recipes, please.
Yeah, it's like a pie, but made with a sweet custardy type of. So from cream or something.
Oh, that sounds good.
So that's another very nice one.
Okay, I'll have to add those to my list.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the Greek ones, they have influence obviously from the Ottoman Empire, because so many years was part of the Ottoman Empire, and also they go even further to the Byzantine times, and they do have a lot of Arab and Middle Eastern influences and similarities to desserts from that region. Really, I don't think there are many that you can call uniquely Greek. I think. The influences are drawn from all these different places, and they have similarities.
I mean, this is the problem, though, with a lot of baked goods. I'm not a stranger to the comments on my channel that say, "No, that's not this. It comes from here," and it's like, well, I don't know that we can really know the true origin of any of these things. They're all influenced by something.
Exactly. Yeah, we're all influencing each other a little bit, and people move all the time. People go to different places, and there was different empires and bigger entities. So there was always cross-pollination of cultures and ingredients traveling from place A to go to place B. I think.
Right.
And also, I think what other desserts? I mean, I think I saw recently. The islands. You remember Mamma Mia, the film?
Yeah.
So that was filmed in a Greek island called Skopelos.
Oh, okay.
I believe it was Skopelos. So they have a dessert made from plums, I believe.
Oh.
So like a unique variety from the island, and it's I think they dry it. So they take the stone out and they dry it slowly, and it becomes more intense and sweeter. So like a prune in a sense. And then they make a spoon dessert with this.
Oh, okay.
And the taste is really unique on that one. I have to find.
Yes, please
some
send
links
that to me. I want to look into that.
And I'll definitely send it to you. What's the future for baking across Europe?
I suppose my ultimate goal would be I would love to publish a cookbook. I have a few ideas for cookbooks I would love to write. I'd love to make a cookbook cataloging the regional breads of Germany and the regional breads of Switzerland. I'm sure there are books like that in German, but nothing that I've found in the English-speaking world. I'd also love to write a cookbook on European Christmas traditions, just because there's nothing quite like Christmas in Europe. I had the there really isn't. I had the opportunity to be in Germany for Christmas one year, and Christmas in the U.S. is just a letdown after that.
Really?
Yes, just with the Christmas markets everywhere and all the foods and the traditions that go with Christmas time and Advent. I've always loved that. So it would be lovely to write a book on that sort of thing. If I'm really dreaming big, I'd love to actually film cooking shows in people's homes throughout Europe, but we'll see about that one. I would love to have people show me how to make their traditional foods. And but I don't know. That's quite the dream. So we'll see if that one actually happens.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for that. Yeah. Excellent. Basically, yeah. What about are you from?
Where am I from?
Yeah.
I'm originally from California, but I currently live in New England, in Massachusetts. So I live near Cape Cod.
Yeah. So what kind of traditions baking? Well, I mean, influences, I would say. What are they? Are they mainly British, English?
Yes, mostly English traditions. If you're going to go into like really traditional New England food, then it would be like baked beans and brown bread, which is steamed like an English pudding with molasses.
Right.
But in my region, unrelated to baking, in my region, there's a lot of fish because I live near the ocean. So a lot of fish. Yeah, I know. a lot of fish in the cuisine here. So we have a local clam called quahogs. I don't know if you know what a quahog is, but they're like a really big a very big clam, like the size of your hand, and we eat them stuffed, like with a stuffing. Yeah.
What is in the stuffing?
So also where I live, we have a really big Portuguese community and influence. So because of that, a lot of foods have Portuguese foods in them. So the local clams are stuffed with dried breadcrumbs and chouriço, which is a Portuguese sausage. So it's really good. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sounds good.
But baked goods wise, there's a lot of Portuguese bakeries around here. So I get the chance to eat things like Portuguese sweetbread and pastel de nata and all those sorts of things. So I have a little bit of Europe here.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Thanks for the discussion because it's very interesting to see what people discover in their own culinary adventures through time and space, of course. It's an adventure, basically.
Yes, definitely.
And it's good to meet other people in similar wavelengths that they're interested in, not in the food per se, but also, the stories behind the dishes, right?
Right. It definitely, that's what I'm most interested in. Obviously, the food is fun to eat and cook, but I think what's really drawn me into getting more into baking and food is mostly the culture that comes from it and the stories that come from it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've really had a lot of fun talking to you.
And let's be in touch and looking forward to more recipes on your channel. And tell us again, it's called Baking...
Bake Across Europe.
Great. And you also have an Instagram? I have an Instagram, a Facebook, and a Twitter. I'm not super... engaged over on Instagram, but I do post on Facebook and Twitter every day. Little blurbs about different European baked goods. Yeah, and things that you discover. And fantastic. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Thom. Thanks for listening. I've been Thomas Dinas, and this was the Delicious Legacy Podcast. Remember, you can get the podcasts ad-free and early if you subscribe on my Patreon page. On top, you get a fantastic collection of exclusive posts, exclusive episodes, plus recipes and other musics by me. Thank you, and see you again next week for another archaeogastronomical adventure.